live. Thank you for joining us today, Christian. Before we jump in and hear a little bit more about Christian's background, he's an entrepreneur at heart, has a graduate of Georgia State University, lives in Atlanta, so Atlanta local through and through, and has worked for several startups, including Shift Gig and HireWire. So thank you for joining us today, Christian.
Thank you for having me. Obviously, very excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, we're excited to have you. And for those watching, can you share a little bit about Qoins?
Definitely. Yeah. So I started Qoins back in 2017. We are a financial wellness solution that combines education and automation to really help consumers achieve financial wellness. And what that means, right, can be in a lot of different things for people, but we try to focus in on consumer debt. So credit cards, auto loans, student loans, mortgages, any form of revolving debt. I think obviously with COVID, that's a huge topic of discussion now. And so that's really the high level premise. And, I started it just because of a personal pain point coming out of college.
Yeah, and can you share? I know it's a online platform, helps people pay down debt. How does it work?
Yeah. So how it works is when you sign up, what we're trying to do is really eliminate that consumer behavior or the habit forming that, it takes a hard time to do for consumers, right? So what we do is, we have a mobile app that you can sign up for. You add the lender that you're typically using on an everyday basis, or the card that you're using on an everyday basis. You connect that card. And then from there, you choose how you want to save throughout the month. So you can, do roundups, you can do payroll deductions, you can do smart savings, you can do weekly or one-off withdrawals, really, at any pace that you believe, is best fit for you. And then the last piece is adding in the lender, the debt that you want to make, pay down as fast as possible. And so we curate a lot of the large popular lenders that are out there, right? Large institutions, Capital Ones, things like that. And then based on category, you just let us know who you want us to make a payment towards. Once you've set up that process, it's kind of set it and forget it. We manage all of the, withdrawals that are happening throughout the month. We help you save the money in our Qoins account throughout the month. And then once per month, all those savings in the Qoins account will actually disperse to your lender on your behalf. And we specifically try to apply it towards the principal. The biggest thing, finding is that if we can apply it towards the principal, you're saving on interest, which is also saving on the loan term, which is overall improving your credit score. And then obviously giving you the ability to lower your debt to income ratio. And then obviously give you more opportunity to maximize on other things that you may be in, other goals that you might have.
That's great. I know we met back earlier this summer, and I've seen even the short evolution. You guys are moving rather quickly. Can you share with the audience a little bit more about your broader journey? How did you go from your humble beginnings as a grocery store clerk, and then working your way up through startups, and now you're CEO of your own venture. Can you share more of that journey with us?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, so I think just growing up, my family, they're from El Salvador. So, I grew up seeing kind of a lot of my aunts and uncles having the entrepreneurial mindset, just in having their own businesses, from a salon to a brick masonry, to, a home cleaner, right? And those are all, I guess, not sexy jobs, but it was in their own right, their own jobs, and they were paying, their own bills, and, taking care of their family. And I think it's something that always stood out to me. And so, as I grew up, I would always tell people that I want to be the CEO of Coca-Cola. And I even made my ranks in working at Coke for a little bit. So I was working at Publix, as you mentioned, a grocery clerk. And then I went to Coca-Cola. And when I started working there, I would literally tell people, like, I'm going to be the CEO of Coke. I'm going to take over Muhtar Kent's position whenever he retires. And, working in corporate America, I learned quickly that it wasn't something that I wanted to do. There was a lot of bureaucracy. There was a lot of, like, show face and all that stuff. And it's just not something that I really wanted to do. I wanted my actions to kind of speak for themselves. So I took kind of like a hiatus. I was in college, and I just took a 6-month break, went and traveled to Argentina, got a lot of like my interest in business there, and then came back and really started focusing on my own things, and then progress into what now is Qoins.
And when can you talk a little bit about how it began? Like when did you first come up with the idea, and when did you meet your co-founder Nate?
Yeah, so I started the idea. So after I graduated from college, I started working at a company called HireWire. So I was working with some of my closest friends, and it was very competitive. I think everyone was always trying to be the best, and uh, show like almost like show off to the CEO there. And he created this environment of like competition, which was really good. So we would learn extremely fast. But I remember we were at lunch one day and we were all just throwing out ideas that we wanted to do. And so I threw out this idea for Qoins, which at the time I had named Consolidet. So it was a terrible name. Um,
Coins is so much better.
it was so much better, I know.
Consolidate.
Yeah, so that was the initial name. And so from that idea, they're like, oh, you should run with it, like, play around with it. And it was kind of a serendipitous because there was this pitch competition called the Plug ATL. And my nickname at that startup was the Plug. I was the hustler, the guy that could just get things done. So I applied. And then, long story short, I made top 10. I didn't win, but it was $100,000 pitch competition for a product that I had never, even thought would become a business at that time. And so, I didn't win, but then I got that fire in me to want to kind of get it started. So I started going to network events, and that's where I met my co-founder Nate, literally at this thing called Co-Founders Lab, which I didn't even expect to meet anyone, but that's where I met him.
That's great. And what as you were moving from there, what pushed you to really why have you focused in Atlanta? Both of you are from Atlanta, but can you talk a little bit about the ecosystem there and why you chose to stay or be there? Well, I think you're muted. There we go.
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yeah. So, you broke out in the first part. So I think I heard you, like what made me want to stay in Atlanta and kind of grow it there. Okay. Yeah. So, obviously I was born in Houston, but I lived in Atlanta my whole life. I working at the two other startups, I kind of saw the opportunity here in Atlanta. One, from a cost living perspective, it's just so much cheaper from a New York or SF. I actually got a taste of SF and I didn't like it either. And so like, my roots are here, Georgia State is here. And so I really wanted to, one of the goals aside from building my business was to kind of establish myself within Atlanta, because I felt like if I could build something that and thrive here, that my impact would be a lot bigger than just being, I always compare it as like being the small fish in a big pond versus being the big fish in a smaller pond. Whereas I feel like the pond in Atlanta is now definitely getting bigger, but I feel like I've kind of established, or my team in general has established ourselves as kind of like one of those companies that is growing with the city and the startup ecosystem. And so, we're able to make more impact than just our business alone. I'm able to connect with the university systems across the board, able to help, other upcoming entrepreneurs. So it means a lot more, I think, from where I want to be long term.
Yeah, and especially being a center for, it's a very diverse city, but
Exactly.
also a city that has a strong African American community as well. So,
Exactly.
if you're and looking, I know you've been working on coins for about 4.5 years. Now, can you share a
Almost
little
4 years.
bit? Yeah, well, almost 4 years. So, okay, so if you share a little bit, what's been some of the challenges in the journey?
Yeah. I mean, I'm a first time entrepreneur. So that in itself, there's a lot of growing pains. Then it's, having a co-founder that you've never worked with, but finding that balance to understand their perspective and then my perspective, and then understanding that there's an end goal and we have that same mission and goal. And so at the end of the day, we're a team. So I think that's a big piece. The other piece is like I've never managed people prior, aside from like at my other companies, right? So managing people that are here because they believe in me or my co-founder in the business, in the mission, what motivates people to continue working with us, and then in general is just like how do you build something from nothing, like you know the fact that I in matter of like a few months I was able to ideate this this thesis that, I want to help people pay off debt, to then going to a pitch competition, to then having a product that I had envisioned, to actually getting it into consumers' hands, is exciting. But there's a lot of growing pains. There's a lot of changes. There's a lot of understanding the nuances of like, at what point is, too much feedback? At what point are you looking to create something that customers may not even think they need? So yeah, I mean, I can go on and on about, I mean, more than anything, it's the fact that I'm constantly learning and growing as the business is growing as well. And so I think that's probably the toughest piece is understanding that I'm not always going to be right. I'm not always going to know anything, but that I need to be constantly growing and learning as quickly as I can so that I can set myself up for success.
Yeah, I like the way you put that because it's like in the beginning you're just iterating, increasing the rate of learning, right? You're doing, but also being able to take feedback and not take it personal. I would say it's tough for
Mm-hmm.
me as well. I would say I've talked to a lot of founders. You're one of the like I think compared to other founders, you take like you're constantly like taking. You're like okay, and then you just like incorporate it. So I have to say, hats off to you. How would you say you've developed that skill for yourself as you're just getting feedback, or was if you can share a moment that you've gotten what might be tough feedback, but you just incorporated it, iterated it into the product, as you're managing that. Can you share that?
I have a good example actually, like pricing, right? So like obviously you want to create set a value for your business, and starting off, I always wanted to be like either the cheapest or like the lowest, dollar value that I could possibly be, because I knew that I don't necessarily want to be charging my consumers to help them pay off debt. But then over time, we understood that like one, consumers are willing to pay because it's a goal that they feel they're invested in themselves, and so their willingness to pay shows that their willingness to achieve that goal. But one of my investors early on was like, "Hey, you need to up the price to by $1," and I was like, "That's crazy! Like, no, it's going against everything that I ever thought of." And then, recently we made that change, and he was like, "I told you that like 2 years ago," and so like. It's one of those things. Like it definitely took me a while, and it was never like, "Oh, you're wrong," but it was just like I think the perspective that I was looking at it was, a little bit blurred. And so like now, I think I've grown and matured and learned a lot, that I can kind of get a full scope of the reasoning why people say certain things. And I've also been through it a little bit longer to understand, what's the outcome between some of these things too. So, I think all of it's time. Like, the fact that, I think almost we've been doing it live for like 3.5, almost 4 years. But the first part was really just ideation, figuring out like, what is it? What do we want this to become? Once you really get into the trenches, really when and that's when you over time are going to build that confidence, build that learning, build that wisdom, and build the team and network to also help you kind of make the decisions, so it doesn't feel like you're only making them yourself.
Yeah, that's a great point. And what changed during what has changed for you in terms of the product? It seemed like with what did you call the original name? Collateral.
Consolidate.
Consolidate.
Consolidate. Yeah.
So yeah, it went from Consolidate to Qoins. Of course, the name change is one thing, but the concept seems pretty straightforward. When people talk to me, they're like, okay, what is Qoins? I tell what I usually go. Sometimes they're familiar with the Acorns or Betterment. I was like, that's for investing, automated investing. This is like automated pay off your debt. And they're like, oh, okay. It's a like
Yeah.
seems like a very simple concept, but what for you has shifted specifically with the product as you over the last couple of years?
So yeah, the product is forever growing and changing. With COVID, that was probably our biggest, uh, not change of heart, but like opportunity that we saw, for us as a business, because we always knew, like even starting the business, that like we're always going to be pay off debt, and that's always going to be the topic of discussion. But we need to be thinking about, long term, what are other things that we can be doing to help service our customer. And so when COVID happened, a lot of people lost a lot of jobs. Debt payments wasn't really a specific the thing that people were paying, right? I mean, the default rate increased astronomically. People were like holding off on extra payments. And then obviously government came in and put a foothold to help with all that stuff. So it really put a big dent into our initial business model. But at the same time, we knew that those ramifications that were happening from like an economic standpoint were just going to actually be more fruitful for us like down the line. So going into next year, we knew that that still core business model was huge, but what could we be doing to offer our services in other ways that still align with the overall mission? So that's why we introduced like savings, right? And savings in a way that like, still ties into what's happening. It's like the emergencies, right? The government's coming in and giving you $1,200. Why? Because the average person doesn't even have $1,000 in their savings, emergency savings, right? What other things? How can we hold you accountable? So we incorporated coaching. And so what that did for us is also help us expedite kind of like our vision and our product roadmap as to like what do we want to become long term. I think there was actually an article on like Crunchbase or TechCrunch the other day about how fintechs were specifically focused on one thing, and a lot of them are now putting all the pieces together. And I bucket like financial services under like three pillars, which is automation, recommendations, and referrals. And then there's been a lot of big companies that have focused on one and then started working on the others. I think automation is usually the key that you should start with first, and then focus on recommendations and referrals to drive other things. But yeah, over time, like we've identified that long term we want to be like a one-stop shop for our consumers, but we still want to focus in on consumer debt. How do we help build that trust with you so that you know that we're in your corner, and then help you save money or help you, earn rewards or help you like consolidate or lower your interest rate so that at any given point you're saving money in any essence of financial wellness.
And how do you envision the product evolving over time? I think most of debt, people's debt, ends up being in, yes, student loans is one of them, mortgages is another. How do you envision like really owning the space?
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, I think we're gonna always have like our four core buckets and like really honing in on each of them. So obviously, credit cards is always gonna be our biggest one because 60% of consumers have credit card debt. I think it was about 10 to between I think it's 15 and 30% of consumers actually have student loan debt. But student loan is such a big amount that it's always talked about. So figuring out ways to work with university systems there, auto loans, like majority of people have auto loans. How do we help you pay off that debt even faster, even if you're financing or leasing, right? And then mortgages, right? How do we help you improve your overall debt to income ratio so you can buy a home? So like I think we're gonna get deeper and deeper with those buckets in general so that we can help our customers even before they start paying off debt. And I think that's why we started introducing and incorporating financial coaching and the savings. But from a product roadmap perspective, like we want to soon be introducing a Qoins card, and what that will do is kind of tie both ends of that. So like knowing that we're helping you pay off the debt, but what can we do to make that faster? What can we do to either own that debt payment so that it's the experience for the consumer is like every time you're making a purchase, like you're always going to have to do, you're also contribute towards that debt like instantly versus having to wait a month. And so for us is our goal and product vision is always going to remove that latency for that experience.
Great. If I were to shift gears slightly to the current climate, you mentioned COVID. We talk a bit about how we can better advocate for Black founders and founders of color.
Yep.
Can you talk a little bit about the journey of fundraising as a founder of color?
Yeah, man, I can go on a whole hour just on that sprint, but it's tough.
That's
it's
why
tough.
I asked.
Like, yeah, it's extremely hard. Fundraising in its own right is very difficult, right? Convincing people to fall in love with your product, your vision, you and where you're going is really hard, especially with people that you've never met. And especially now in this environment, like we were fundraising in March and I just started kind of like to start my campaign to go out in different states to start people, had a lot of meetings set up, and then COVID happened. So, I like to think I'm a very, what's it called? I'm very extroverted. So like, I like to meet in person, like show you, my mannerisms. So you get to know me and understand who I am and that I'm trustworthy and all that stuff. Right. But it's kind of hard to do like when you're just talking to someone via, a Zoom call. So that was a bit tough in itself, but yeah, fundraising is very difficult. I think one of the things that I've had to learn is that, the expectation is like 10 times more and 10 times more output that people want, and that you also have to be able to put your foot down and not think that, not let investors try to take advantage of the situation, whether from their perspective, like, oh, I'm investing in a black or brown founder, or two, like, I'm going to help you. Like, no, that's not the case. This is a two-way street. I'm adding value for you. You're helping me add more value for the overall business. But your money isn't necessarily my make or break moment. Like, I started this business, I will figure out ways to keep it going. And your capital, in essence, is going to help us get to the next place. But your money directly is not going to be the end all be all. So it's very hard, because at the same time you have to say no. I've I've walked away from $100,000, $250,000, and when I needed it, and it's just like, obviously, just knowing that you have to bet on yourself and know what your value and your business value is worth, and not let investors, take advantage. It's not to say like all investors are bad, but I've definitely had my fair share of, like, you know, very bad, deals.
No, I'm glad you shared, and especially, you've backed by Google for Startups, Wheelhouse Ventures, South Carolina FinTech Ventures, and also the Front Row Fund. So and Rebel, disclosing, Rebel One is also backing Qoins as well. So we were very impressed with Christian and his team, and are glad he was able to talk to us tonight, and share a little bit of his story. And if we take a step back a little bit, you've talked a little bit more about the story and the real, like, that's one of the things we like to share with the audience, because some of them are aspiring founders, but as well as for the investors that know what it takes. Can you share, one of the tough moments and how you made it through?
um yeah, I mean, I have a lot. I will give, like, when I first started the company, this is more like a personal and business oriented. They kind of combine with one another. So when I was working at Hirewire, I was like feeling a little weird, like, went to the doctor, thought I was going to be, I thought it was a flu or something. Um, Fast forward, I leave Hirewire because I want to start Coins. So now I've let go of all my health insurance. I've bet on myself that I'm going to do what I want to do with the business. And then from there, about 2 weeks later, I end up getting admitted to the hospital. So now, like, it's just like, health personal, is a big issue. And now I just started this business. I don't even know where it's going to go. I just started it. And I'm over here trying to apply for accelerator programs, at my, on like the hospital bed. So that was like one of definitely my lowest points, but like coming out of that, it made me extremely strong. And it gave me, I think, the resilience and the grit that I think you need to run a business, because at the end of the day, if you don't have your health, you won't have any of the other things. So taking care of yourself is super important. And it wasn't to say that I wasn't taking care of myself. It was a kind of more of a health issue that, I didn't even see coming. But, these are the things that you have to deal with. So understanding that, you have to balance, personal and business, and it comes out of nowhere, I think is very tough. So I would say that was probably one of the toughest moments thus far, that I've had to deal with kind of early on. And
Ooh.
ever since, everything after that has definitely made it like that much easier.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I was my first one of my first startups. We ended up closing it, but I ended up, what is it? I was so stressed out. I was like losing my hair. It was insane. It
That's
was
already
like,
started happening.
yeah, it's a wild ride. That's what we tell. But you make
Absolutely.
it through, and then, what is it? There's always a fire. That's the short story.
Oh yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
taking a step back in the entrepreneurial ecosystem, I'm excited that, you're, again, based in the Atlanta ecosystem. What more do you believe needs to happen in order to, we talk about the small amount of funding going to women and underrepresented founders. It's something that we pride ourselves on, is finding great founders that just happen to be, from underrepresented backgrounds. What do you think needs to happen more, in order to accelerate more, women and Black and brown founders?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've always said that like the resources are there. Like we have so many programs that are helping you how to do a business and, mentors and all this stuff. And like I've probably been through like a handful now. Um, but I can go on all day. Like there needs to be a level playing field when it comes to capital investments. And people like Joe Womack, Jewel, or like that are working on Google for Startups and some of these other programs, like they've been amazing because they've now been able to leverage their network and their success to then be able to give back to the ecosystems that they're in. Most of them, I mean, they're in Atlanta, so I'm just speaking about them. But to be able to give that same level of playing field, that opportunity, and so like I think that's what it takes is like those successful, diverse founders that are winning, but then also doing their part in giving back and in supporting in other ways. Because I think what there's a piece where like obviously you're helping it from an ecosystem level, but then also from like a board level. Like I mean, there's like it's known that there's just like not a lot of Black and brown board members too. Like how do I get more people that I can confide in, that I could probably trust more at the board level too, so I don't feel like I'm getting taken advantage of. So I think though it's looking at it from the top down and the bottom up.
Yeah, and California has just passed first states to pass actually, mandatory board representation for underrepresented groups. So it'll be interesting to see the impact over the next couple of years. Taking a step back, thanks for spending time with us tonight. I'm gonna, if you could share with the audience what's next for Qoins.
So what's next? I mean, obviously we're fundraising right now. So, if there's any interested investors, we are fundraising, looking to raise $1.5 million. We got just under about $1 million of that committed. So excited about that. The other thing too is that obviously, we're going into the holiday season and the new year. We always actually find these few months to be our most lucrative because people are spending more, people more conscious of how much they're spending and what they want to get achieved going into the new year. So, we're about to be hitting a very busy season for us. So we're very excited. Like, what's next for us is really focusing on customer growth, product enhancements to make that product even that much better for our consumers. And then just focusing on execution.
Awesome. Awesome. And for those that are interested in paying down their debt faster, check out Qoins. It's Qoins.io. The link is in the podcast notes. Thank you, Christian, for joining us. And thank you, everyone, for watching. This was the next episode of Rebel One Live. So thanks again, Christian.
Thank you, Sergio.
All right.